If you ever feel like you're eating healthy, but you're still dealing with bloating, stomach pain, or constipation, I want to talk to you today because maybe you've tried tracking what you eat. Maybe you've tried a food, mood, and symptom journal. Maybe you haven't, but it's a really great tool that can help you understand what's actually going on in your gut. So I want to dig into the food, mood, and symptom journal today to show you exactly how to do it and how to interpret the data so that you get something out of it. So it means something useful. So I'm going to show you how to use that tool today and help you connect the dots between what's going on and what might be some of the triggers. So let's get going. I used to think that tracking was just about writing everything down and hoping for some magic aha moment. But the real magic actually happens when you learn how to interpret it in a way that helps you understand what's actually going on. And after 15 years of doing this, and after reading and looking through thousands of food, mood, and symptom journals in lots of different formats, whether that be on paper or electronic, and I'll show you both of those options in a minute, I've learned a few things that can help you understand what's better going on in your gut by looking at the food, the mood, and the symptoms that you're tracking. And those three pieces are really important. So let's get to it. All right, so if you're not familiar with me, my name is Erin Harner. I'm an integrative gut health dietitian. I've been doing this work for 15 years, as I mentioned, and I love nothing more than looking through food, mood, and symptom journals because they are so enlightening. But if you don't know what to look for, I can understand that there might be some confusion about what the heck is the point of writing all this down if I don't know what to do with the data. So that's what I want to show you with today. So the first thing is filling them out properly. If you have just tracked the food that you've been eating, the beverages you've been drinking, you are missing 3/4 of the puzzle because you're missing how you feel and how your body functions. And those are really, really important keys. So the first step is do it right. All right, so when you're thinking about tracking, you want to track for at least 3 to 5 days. Get some weekdays in there, get at least a weekend day if the weekends and the weekdays fluctuate. A lot of people will have a very different schedule, very different routine, very different foods on the weekends versus the weekdays. So it's really important that you track the reality of what's going on for you. And the more data you have, not necessarily the better, but you do need to have enough data to actually look at objectively and see what the heck's going on in there. So when you're thinking about tracking, the first thing is your food. Everything you eat, including quantities ideally. The next thing you're going to think about is beverages, right? If you have a cup of tea or coffee in the morning, you want to make sure that's on there. And if you're adding any milks or sweeteners, put that on your food, mood, and symptom journal. If you're waking up feeling bloated, where does that go if you're only recording foods? So what you're thinking about here, and I'll show you an example of mine. This is a food, mood, and symptom journal that I show and I share with everyone in a couple of my guides. I have a brand new guide that just came out called How I Got Rid of Constipation. And this exact journal is in that guide. So in the first column, we have the time of the meal, right? Timing really matters when it comes to food. It's not just what you eat, it's also how you eat and when you eat. So think about recording in the first column, the food and beverages. Also the time, when are you having those meals? Is it early in the morning? Is it late at night? Is it every couple hours throughout the day? Are your meals spread out? This timing really matters. The next column is going to be mood. So we've got food and beverages, we've got mood, and in the third column, we have symptoms and bowel movements. When I'm thinking about mood and thinking about wanting to get the most data from a client that I'm working with, when I'm thinking about mood, I'm thinking about stress, about hunger, about anxiety or depression or feelings of being euphoric or feeling down, right? Stressed, anxious. Those are words that I would want to see in the mood category. Also, if you like to rate your stress levels, I love to see stress levels on a scale of 1 to 5. What's your stress level right now? Is it a 1, practically none? Or is it a 5, super high stress? Because stress correlates with gut stuff. And the sooner we get that understanding, the better. One meal eaten by the exact same person in a calm, peaceful environment will digest completely differently than that exact same meal eaten in the car on the way to an appointment that you're late for and you're rushing. Very different experience. Same meal, different experience. So having the mood category here is really, really important. How stressed are you? How hungry are you? Are you feeling full? Are you feeling lethargic? The mood category is where you can really write down how you're feeling. And then on the far right column in my guide here is the symptoms and the bowel movements. So I want to see if you're having a bowel movement, exactly what time. When is it? Write it down. When is your bowel movement? And if you use the Bristol stool chart, we can think about hard and lumpy all the way up to super soft and runny. So between 1 and 7. Where are you on the Bristol stool chart? And if you're not familiar with that, go ahead and look it up. Just do a quick search, Bristol stool chart, and you'll find a scale 1 to 7. And you can write your Bristol stool number right on your chart, right on your food, mood, and symptom journal. And that will help you have an understanding of what are you eating? How are you feeling? What are your bowel movements? Do you have any? How many do you have per day? When do they typically occur? These are questions that I ask myself when I'm looking at these journals for clients, and I want to teach you how to analyze to kind of a broad overview of what you can gain from the food, mood, and symptom journal. Other things that you're going to include in the symptom category are true symptoms. So bloating, constipation, flatulence, gas. Are you belching? Do you have abdominal pain? If so, where is it? Write it all down. Get it all on there. It's really, really important. The more data you have, the more data you have to work with. All right, next, at the very bottom of my guide here, I have water. So we just tick off the boxes. Every time you drink a glass of water, tick off the box. So we can understand how much water are you drinking? How hydrated are you? And clearly, if there's other beverages throughout the day, or there's soups or things that are very hydrating, we're gonna take that into account as well. We also wanna think about sleep. When did you go to bed? When did you wake up? If you wanna write down a sleep score, 0 to 5, 0, like really, really bad, or 1, like pretty bad, and 5, great night's sleep, that would be a nice thing to include as well. And then number of times you woke up, and then any notes you have throughout the day. Like maybe it was a strange day where you had to pick your kid up for a doctor's appointment and you were rushing, or maybe you had a stressful meeting at work, or maybe you had a presentation, or you're planning for a trip, or like whatever. Write it down as a note so that you understand what's actually going on in your day-to-day life. And if you're not a big fan of pen and paper, like this guide, that's fine. I just want to make sure that you understand what to include so that you know what needs to be on here so that you have something useful to analyze. The next thing that you're going to do is, if you prefer to do it on a computer, that's fine. You can use a fillable PDF, or you can just take this guide and make text boxes and just fill it out on the computer. No problem. My clients do it all the time, and then they just send them to me if I'm working with them, like in my Gut Balance Method program, for example. The other option would be something like Chronometer, and this is one of my favorite apps. It makes it really easy to put your data in. There's an option to write comments. There's an option to kind of add bowel movements. You can add symptoms. You can add symptom scores like stress or hunger level and that kind of thing. So it's very adaptable, very versatile, and it allows you to get the data you need in a more electronic format. And one thing I love about Chronometer is it also gives us some really good insight into like how many grams of fiber are you having per day? How much protein, and that kind of thing, which could be really helpful. So the first step is really tracking in a way that's meaningful. Now you understand how to track, the data that you're going to get to analyze is way more useful. All right, next step is timing. So when we're thinking about timing and we're thinking about trying to get some data out of this food, mood, and symptom journal to help us better understand gut issues, things like constipation or bloating or gas or flatulence or abdominal pain or reflux or any of those things, what we want to think about is timing. When we eat something, how soon are the symptoms appearing? Are they immediate? Are they a couple hours later? Are they 4 or 6 hours later? Is it days? The days is tricky. I'm going to warn you, the days is tricky because by the time days have happened, you've already eaten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meals. And when we think about reactions, specifically reactions to food in the body, we're thinking about sugars first. So when we're reacting to sugars, the carbohydrates in food, think lactose would be a good example here. Those are going to be relatively quick. Those are often going to appear 1 to 2 hours later. Once the food gets from the stomach to the small intestine, you're going to start noticing some rumbling, some gurgling, something's going on in there that makes your tummy feel a little uncomfortable. So when we have reactions to sugars, those are going to happen faster. When we're thinking about reactions to proteins, generally, not always, but generally, proteins are going to take a little longer because they're going to activate the immune system, and that takes a little bit more time. And they also have to get from the stomach into the small intestine to really activate the immune system. When I'm thinking about proteins in foods, I'm thinking things like gluten would be a good example of a protein, or corn or soy, or some of the other protein-containing foods that tend to tick off the immune system or can contribute to gut symptoms. We're thinking IgG and IgA, delayed onset food sensitivity reactions. And the reason that they're delayed onset is because they take a while to occur. And the challenge with these that makes them a little tricky to decipher from a food, mood, and symptom journal is that they take hours. And by the time the symptoms might have occurred from the meal that you ate at breakfast, it might be dinner time, or it might be tomorrow, or it might be 2 days from now. And that gets very confusing. But this is why when we're thinking about a food, mood, and symptom journal and understanding what it's telling us, we want to kind of step back and take a look at the big picture. Think, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I understand? What can I see here from an objective lens? I often tell my clients to put on your Erin hat, right? Put on your functional nutritionist dietitian hat to take a look at this as if it's not yours. Pretend you're me and you're looking at somebody else's food record and see what you see. No judgment, just analysis, okay? So we're gonna look at the big picture. So instead of focusing on like one particular food or one particular symptom, we're going to step back and we're gonna say, okay, first of all, what's the timing look like? Generally, after my meals, is there anything I notice? And a question I often ask clients when I'm first starting to work with them or they first give me the food, mood, and symptom journal is, I say, what did you notice? What did you notice by doing this? What are a few things that occurred to you as you were filling this out? And I often hear things like, I had no idea that I was eating so frequently. Or, oh my gosh, I thought I just skipped breakfast a couple days a week, but it looks like it's almost every day. Or, this is really interesting. It looks like I'm having a really big snack in the afternoon and then I'm not really hungry for dinner and then I'm eating late. You'll notice things. So my first question to you is, when you completed the food, mood, and symptom journal, what did you notice? Next, we're going to think about, how does your food variety look? Are you eating basically the same foods every day? Or is there a lot of variety in the meals that you're eating? We're going to think about vegetables. If you were to print this out, if you completed it on a computer, or if you were to do it by hand with just pen or pencil and paper, you can actually take a highlighter. And I used to do this in my practice when I was working with clients one-on-one in person. And I would have them take a highlighter and I'd have them highlight all of the vegetables green. So when you highlight all the vegetables green, it becomes very apparent, like, how many vegetables are in your diet? Right? How many servings? Sometimes it could be like one or none. And they're like, this is interesting. How about fruits, right? Fruits and berries, cherries, like, do you have any fruits in your diet? How many per day, roughly? You could do the same thing. What about whole grains? What about processed foods? What about candies and sweets? What about ultra-processed foods? Foods that come in a package. They're not nutrient dense. What is the relationship between the number of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, whole foods in your diet to the processed foods? How does that compare? Oftentimes, this is a really great place to start. And by recording this all and taking an objective lens and analyzing the data, we can really get a good understanding of like where we need to tweak some things. We want to think about spotting trends, not just particular foods. So instead of guessing, I want you to think about noticing patterns. Like, this is interesting. Every time I have dairy, it looks like I'm getting bloated. That's an interesting observation. You flip, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. That's really interesting. Seems like every time I have dairy, I'm getting bloated. Okay, good observation. Good thing to write down. Dairy might be something to address. But we still don't know, is it the lactose? Is it the casein? Is it the whey? What part of the dairy is the problem? Right? So this is kind of the first big picture step. Are there any foods we notice? And before we villainize the food and say, I'm never having dairy again, we kind of keep looking and say, what else could it be? Is it every time you have dairy, you're actually putting dairy in your coffee? Is it the coffee or is it the milk? I don't know. Something to investigate, something to find out more. What about like, this is interesting. On this day, especially if you're doing something right, like recording in chronometer, on this day, I felt really good. I had very low bloating and I had the most fiber. That's interesting. Oh, look, I also had 2 bowel movements. So what I want you to do is think about not villainizing food or not trying to self-diagnose. I want you to think about what are the patterns that you're noticing, because those patterns will lead you into a direction of what the next step could be. What is the next right thing for me to try? This is interesting. That one day I skipped my digestive enzymes. I had bloating all day long, but this day I got back on track. I started taking my enzymes with my meals again, and my bloating was significantly less, and I had better bowel movements, and oh look, my sleep was better too. That's interesting. So I want you to approach the food, mood, and symptom journal with curiosity, with questions, with an understanding that it's very unlikely that you're going to come up with something super concrete, but it's going to give you the next best step of what could be something that you could try. And that's what I want you to think about here. Believe me, I've looked at well over 1,000 food journals, and I can do this process in the course of maybe a couple minutes. I look through 5 days, and I go through this basically through a checklist in my head. What does the variety look like? What's the timing look like? Are you eating super late at night? Interesting. When they eat super late at night, there's bloating in the morning. I wonder if the food's digesting. What could we do? Maybe we could move the evening meal up a little bit or stop snacking in the evening and see if that helps. Right? So there's a lot of things that we can learn from this experience. And one of my clients' favorite things in my Gut Balance Method program is actually the module where I have them do a lesson. I teach them exactly how to track their food, mood, and symptoms. And then I give them a checklist of all of the questions to ask. What can you learn from your food, mood, and symptom journal? And I have them go through that process. And then they come to me with all of their other questions, like, this is so interesting, and their questions and their observations. And then the next question, of course, is like, okay, so what's the next best step? What's the next right move? And that's something I help clients with in my Gut Balance Method program. So if you're interested in that, you can, of course, learn more. You can always send me a DM or a PM, and I can share more about that with you. But for right now, I want you to think about most people. When they do this sort of thing, they're like, oh my gosh, I have so many food sensitivities. The reality is, oftentimes the tweaks, at least in the beginning, need to come from simple things. Things like hydration and getting enough fiber and variety in the diet and processed foods and whole foods, right? Like putting sugar in your tea all day long or sugar in your coffee, like maybe that's negatively impacting your gut. So there's so many different things that could be impacting your gut and your digestion. And sometimes it's really helpful to have a guide to help you understand this when you get stuck. So if you're like, I don't have time to track, I've tracked and I don't know what to do with the data, like that's what I'm here for. So don't be afraid to reach out. I'll talk to you soon, friends. Take care.